What dark secret are you hiding from everyone?
When my grandpa was on his deathbed, he admitted to killing fellow Marines in the Vietnam War for torturing and raping young girls. Most of our family doesn't know. Edit. Wow, didn't expect this to blow up. Lol. Thank you for all the awards. My grandpa was a pretty cool guy, very calm and mellow, so my mom and I were shocked when he admitted this to us. He was a gunsmith his whole life and was very proud of being a Marine. But the guilt he carried from the war made him believe he was being punished in the end. He died a really painful and traumatic death that I would never wish on anybody. I hope it lets him rest easier in peace, that the majority of you commend what he did. I certainly never held any qualms about it. My great-grandpa told us the same thing. He said he walked in on his Marine friends raping women and children and blew all their heads off. His words. He never let my parents leave us with anyone but my great-grandma and him, because he was so afraid of what piece of shit perverts were lurking out there. Edit. I also want to thank you for blowing my comment up. It is crazy to think there are multiple people out there in the service with this sick behavior. I witnessed my fiance's suicide last year. I moved states afterwards and started a new life. My coworkers, clients, and new friends call me the sunshine of whatever room I walk into, but I'm completely dead inside. Even though I choose to fake it, I resent them for not seeing how fucked up I am. I have a secret fantasy life, populated with imaginary friends. It started in grade school, and I have continued all my life. I am in my 50s now, and still prefer to be alone in my imaginary world, instead of being with family or friends. I can't even tell my psychiatrist because I am afraid he will lock me up or give me drugs to make it all stop. I've done this since I can remember as well. I'm now 42. I first heard about maladaptive daydreaming a little over a year ago. It was a relief to find out I wasn't crazy nor alone, but it's always been my big secret. Last Christmas, Eileen, my sister, and I don't have the same father and are technically half-sisters. My sister's biological father tried to start a relationship with my mom that resulted in a pregnancy and ultimately didn't work out. That biological father is dead now, but I didn't probe any further about his identity or how he died in case it was something traumatic for my mom to remember. So she raised my sister as a single mother at my grandma's house in the 80s. Then she met my father, and they started dating. And it worked out because they got married in the 90s, moved into a new house, and a short time after that, I was born. She told me, never call my sister my half-sister, and just pretend all of this doesn't matter because she's my sister, and I'm keeping it that way. And if anyone asks about the 10-year age gap, I just tell them it's a long story. My sister is technically a half-sister as well, but the way we grew up, she is 100% my sister, and neither of us ever uses the word half when referring to the other. I'm the spitting image of my grandpa on my dad's side. Both my parents are almost a foot shorter than me, but I'm almost the same height as him. When my mother got sick when I was a kid, my grandpa went to visit her daily for extended periods of time in the hospital. In his final months, she did the same. After he passed, we found out he kept a whole other family on the side in secret too. Looking back at my dad's military deployment history, it would also be dicey if she could have gotten pregnant by him around the appropriate time. Based on a collection of various hunches, I'm fairly convinced I'm the product of an affair between my mother and supposed grandfather. More disturbingly, this would probably be one of the most light-hearted revelations about my family. So your dad is actually your half-sibling? Probably, unfortunately. Not that I'd ever bring it up. Don't need even more drama in the mix. Plus, they're so old, I don't really care what they did decades ago, even if it resulted in me. When I was 16, I conspired with a heroin addict I met online to help me off myself with heroin and dump my body in a dumpster in exchange for my valuables. I lived in a small town, and he was in a bigger city where my school had an upcoming trip. We planned for me to slip away during the trip and meet up with him to do the deed. He chickened out last minute and ghosted me. When I was young, probably around age 9 or 10, I was walking home with my dog from a house around the block when he cut the corner and walked diagonally through the yard of this super mean old lady who lived at the end of your street. She was in her yard at the time, tending to these really fancy looking rose bushes she had growing in beds along the border with her neighbor. My dog was a very friendly golden retriever who didn't even really come near her and certainly didn't do anything threatening, but she sprayed the fuck out of him with some kind of insecticide or other chemical she was using on her roses. I ran back home with the dog and hosed him off. He coughed a bunch, but seemed otherwise fine. I didn't tell my parents because somehow I thought I was going to get into trouble for letting the dog walk in her yard. I'm glad I didn't tell them, though, because I decided that night to sneak downstairs, out the half-bath window, and down the street to her yard, where I cut down every goddamn rose bush I could get my hands on. I'm convinced a neighbor poisoned our family dog. We got her when I was in second grade. The poisoning happened when I was in college. They left notes on our door threatening to hurt the dog if she shit in their yard again, but our dog never went to their yard. Anyhow, she fell very ill very fast. She was in intense pain from her insides. She'd let out screams in pain. I don't know if you have ever heard a dog scream. That's the best I can describe it. It wasn't a cry, howl, or bark. It was a haunting scream. She couldn't get comfortable. I'd hold her to try to comfort her, and she'd be okay for a few seconds, and then another scream. We had to put her down. It was the only humane thing to do. I was devastated. It was like losing a sibling. It still hurts, and this was almost 20 years ago. Not long after that, our area had a natural disaster. The whole city was flooded. We moved back in pretty quickly. My dad was a carpenter, but most people took longer to return, including that neighbor. Let's just say every snake, reptile, rat, or any other nasty creature that my crazy dad came across, and there was a lot due to the disaster, was brought straight to their yard and inside their house. For months. I smile to imagine the house of horrors that they returned to. It still wasn't enough, though. In another world, I'd love to burn them inside their house. But alas, civilization. I make up lies about what I do on the weekend. Usually, I don't do much, and I'm very content with that. Others are always asking me what I'm doing, and I never had anything to tell them. I make up lies to get out of phone calls or plans, saying I'm out of town or with friends. I love just being left alone. When I was a teenager, I worked at a novelty tourist shop near me. Being the idiot that I was, I stole a wad of cash from the store. It was $100 in ones. I told nobody, but they knew it was missing. Right about the same time, a coworker who was always trying to get me fired was telling someone she got about $100 in tips from her other job. They ended up firing her because they didn't trust that it wasn't her. Not super dark, but mine is also stealing from my employer. It was a seasonal job, and they told people if you came back next season, you'd get a raise. Next season, I got a 50-cent per hour raise and mentioned it to a couple other people who had also returned, who it turned out didn't get a raise. They went and complained to the boss, who then took my raise back and gave them each 25-cent raises. I argued with the boss for a bit, but eventually just decided I'd steal a few bucks per shift to make up the difference. I've struggled with disordered eating for at least a decade. It ebbs and flows. I know it's unhealthy, but the toxic part of me loves the feeling of being empty. Several years ago, it was really bad. I was at my lowest weight ever. I had brain fog, difficulty breathing. When I started eating again, my stomach would get really bloated, even if I only ate a small amount. I gained weight in the last year or so, and my depression and anxiety got really bad for a while. My family thinks I don't want to spend time with them. However, I just wanted to stay home because trying on my clothes and the idea of being in public made me want to kill myself. It was easier on me mentally to just stay home. I can feel myself slipping back into my old disordered eating habits, unfortunately. When I was younger, I lived with my grandmother. Not long after I turned 18, her health started to decline. That sort of decline that means she won't be around for much longer. Over the months, I did my best to take care of her, getting her to the hospital when she needed, and other things. We had someone coming every day to help her with things I couldn't know. Well, what my family doesn't know is that the night she passed, I was in the living room watching TV. My dog was in bed with my grandma, and I started to hear him whimper and bark. I knew what was happening. I knew that if I acted, I could potentially save her. I didn't want to watch her suffer anymore, though, to watch her live with so much pain and unable to do anything for herself anymore. So I made the choice to let her pass before making any calls. She lived 92 years, and the only regret I have is that she passed a month after I would have graduated if I hadn't been kicked out of school. She had been in good enough health at the time to go to my graduation. I still kick myself for how stupid I was back then. Edit, I didn't expect this much support. Thanks. I'm not too torn up about letting her pass. I knew it was for the best. She was such a great person. She didn't deserve to live in such a poor manner any longer than she already had. I don't regret what I did. I regret what I had done that got me kicked out of school, that I didn't try and make it to graduation for her. I think I've lived my life so far in a way that she'd be proud of. Not graduating before she passed is the only regret I really have in this life so far. And I'm 35 now. So I think I'm doing pretty good. I feel you. When my dad died of cancer, after a painful final night, during which my brother and I took turns watching over him, we both waited to call 911. We wanted to make sure he was dead. We used that thing you put on your finger that measures oxygen in your blood to be safe. My brother and I ended up waiting a few hours, getting our bearings, crying, talking. It was surreal. When I tried to pull off the device, my dad had already gone into rigor mortis and his finger wouldn't budge. That's one of my clearest memories of that day. I work in healthcare, elder care to be specific. I've seen so many families hang on way too long and cause their loved ones so much unnecessary suffering. I know it's a complicated and painful feeling. But trust me when I say you did the right thing. Doing CPR alone on someone at that age is cruel. Their ribs are so fragile that they shatter from the chest compressions. And that's just the beginning of things that cause them pain and discomfort. It's heartbreaking hearing of so many people who were sexually assaulted as children and feeling like they have no option but to hide it, lest it cause irreparable rifts between friends, family, and other close ones. Just want to let all of you affected by this know that if you did go public, you're not the cause of any conflict, no matter how anybody else paints it. You were the victim of one of the most heinous things one human being can do to another. The source of conflict is all down to whoever perpetrated the violence against you, and the shame should not be yours to live with. It's not my secret, but my mom's, and I'm not hiding it from everyone, just the person who it potentially matters to the most. When my mom was in high school in the 60s, she had a long-term serious boyfriend named Jimmy. They were each other's first, they were together for years, and were planning on getting married. He went away to college, my mom stayed behind, but they were still together. You know what happened next? He cheated and got the new girl pregnant. He comes home to break the news to my mom. Abortion was not legal at the time. He basically says that he wants to be with my mom, but he has no choice but to marry this other girl. My mom was devastated. Here's the secret. My mom was also pregnant by him, but hadn't told him yet. She decided she wasn't ever going to tell him. Jimmy went on to marry the other girl and never knew my mom was also pregnant. She told me that she later threw herself down a flight of stairs to cause a miscarriage. My mom actually reconnected with Jimmy during the early days of Facebook. She didn't have an account, but asked me to look for him using mine. He was still married to the same person. My mom was married to my dad. They wrote to each other for a while, using my account, signed their messages saying, "I love you." My mom passed away a number of years ago. I think about this knowledge I have that Jimmy doesn't, this major life event thing that he doesn't even know happened. That could have changed the trajectory of many lives. I'm certainly not going to tell him. It's not my secret to tell. Edit, there seems to be a part of the story that I didn't make clear enough. My mom had a miscarriage and never had that baby. It was an intentional miscarriage by throwing herself down the stairs. Jimmy is not my father.